Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars. SoundCartel. How long is your onboarding process for new hires? A week? 2 weeks? A month? Well, ideally, it's actually 90 days because adjustment takes time and committing to the right onboarding process is so important for company culture and profitability. From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. "90 days may seem like a long time and a lot of effort, but according to Brad Giles, founder and marketing director of Evolution Partners, a new hire needs a full 3 months to thoroughly comprehend and apply what's expected of them. Otherwise, problems could persist well into the future." Brad is also the author of Onboarded, How to Bring New Hires to the Point Where They Are Effective Faster. And he's seen plenty of onboarding mistakes, as well as the damage inflicted on businesses that don't do it properly, which he discusses shortly. First, what exactly is onboarding? Brad starts by explaining to Chris Ashmore what it isn't.
It's not hiring, it's not induction, it's not orientation, and it's not training. So onboarding is the process of taking someone from outside your organisation and making them a productive, independent, confident member of your team who understands the culture, the technical and process expectations and your expectations as their manager. So there's a lot of things that it's not, but equally we can be quite clear about what it is. And there's quite a lot of confusion throughout there.
Well, it sounds easy, but are companies doing onboarding well, do you think?
Well, there's what I think, and then there's kind of what the data says. And the first point of data that I'd point to is that almost everyone has a bad onboarding experience. Anecdotally, almost everyone would say that they've had a bad onboarding experience.
So why are so few businesses perhaps not understanding that and not adequate enough with their onboarding?
The good news is that it's not just that, you're a bad manager. There are structural reasons that are causing this to happen. So the first is that there's no clear ownership. For example, we know who owns sales, or we know who might own revenue or even production, something like that. But no one actually owns onboarding, okay? Second is that there's no clear outcome. So it doesn't contribute to a KPI in the way that sales might, or for example, hiring might. So there's no real connection there to something or any other objectives. And third is that it's a part-time by very busy managers. So what that means is that a busy manager who has to onboard a new hire might only do it 2 times a year. So it's not really their central focus, and they tend to look at it as humans would and say, well, let's just get this thing out the way as quick as possible.
So what are the consequences then if the onboarding process isn't adequate enough?
It's actually crazy how much it costs. There's this thing that I call onboarding debt. You've probably heard of sleep debt. So in other words, if you don't get enough sleep one night, you are going to have maybe no real consequences. You might be a bit grumpy the next day, and for a few nights you might only be a bit grumpy. Then go for a few weeks or months and there may be some second order consequences with concentration and things. But then if you leave it for longer, there are going to be some real serious health issues with sleep debt. It's very similar with onboarding debt. You can get away with onboarding one person not so well, but it compounds as you go through the organisation. So the first is this accumulation of what I call onboarding debt, and then that manifests in people not understanding how to do things, which then translates into more and more errors and problems and issues. The second is culture. So there's a problem around culture. So basically, my claim is that many cultures are actually born of poor onboarding. So the culture that you build comes about because people don't really understand all of these expectations that I mentioned earlier. But then, of course, is the kicker, the hard dollar cost. And that is there's a direct connection to retention and attrition and actual productivity.
Mazars is an international audit, tax and advisory firm committed to helping clients confidently build and grow their businesses. Experience a new perspective with Mazars. Visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.
Well, if we look then at what makes a good onboarding process, what do you suggest, Brad?
Within the book, there are 2 tools that I outline for people to complete. So the first is what's called a job scorecard. You've probably heard of a job description before. It describes a job. Well, this one is what I would call a role scorecard. And that, just like a sports ground, you would see the scorecard. This outlines quite clearly, this is the score in which this person is successful in the role. So that outlines what does success look like in the role, number 1. And then number 2 is what I call an onboarding sprint plan. And so that is a 90-day plan that people would complete that quite clearly demonstrates how that success in the role will be learned by the new hire. So very simple tools that are in the book, but that helps people to understand exactly this is how you do it and this is why you do it.
Can you elaborate with the 90 days? Why 90 days and what precisely should business owners think about there?
The understanding of people, it accelerates from 7 to 90 days. The second part is there's this thing called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. And what that says is that after 7 days, people actually forget 90% of what they've learned. Okay, but if you learn it again and again and again, after about 4 weeks, what happens is that people actually switch to remember 90% of what they've learned. So we're using this psychology process to get people to understand what those expectations are that I outlined earlier. The second point is that an effective onboarding process should actually tell us that we've got the wrong person as well and that they need to exit. And so that aligns with the statutory legal probation in most countries around the world that you can exit a person in the probation period without any other costs or problems if they're not right for the job. There's a couple of reasons, but basically it aligns with the learning that's needed, the way that people learn and understand, and that we can exit them if they're not right. And we should know by that point that they're right or wrong, or they're a successful or unsuccessful fit.
Are there any mistakes that companies make when they do their onboarding?
Almost everyone has a bad onboarding story. I mean, most of the listeners here will probably think, I remember when I joined that company, they did a terrible job. And they're like, I don't know who my manager is. I don't know what to do. Like, it's just everywhere. The way to build a great organisation is to get the right people on the bus doing the right things the right way. Maybe you've heard of that phrase before. Okay, so hiring gets the right people on the bus. Okay, so we've employed the right people. But that's not it. Right? Then there's another part, which onboarding gets them doing the right things the right way. And so we kind of take the first bit and we tend to think it as being deal done. Okay, it's like I sold my car or I bought a car or I bought a house, whatever it might be, when I hire someone. But the problem is that that's only the beginning. That's when onboarding, the 90-day process that makes them a successful fit begins. And that's the point, is that we need to make them a successful fit. So the first point would be that they rely on HR managers. So they think onboarding is done by HR. It's not done by the manager. But let's be fair, the new hire doesn't want to go in and sit in an office with a HR manager talking about safety processes for 3 months, right? They want to learn all of those things from their manager. How can I be successful in the role? The second thing, obviously, I already mentioned, is they have short onboarding periods, 7 or 14 days, okay, not 90 days. And then the third one, which connects to that 90-day question as well, is they give up at 30 days because they're meeting weekly with the new hire, the manager. And after about 30 days, it feels a little bit redundant. It's like, well, I kind of taught you most things. Like, it seemed like you're going well. Why do we need to keep going? And it's meant to feel this way. And in the book, I outline these 3 stages where we go from understand in the first 30 days, understanding all of those things. Then the second stage is learning and apply, and then embedding all of those learnings and application. So after 30 days, we're really only just exiting the understand stage. So people naturally feel like it should end there.
That was Brad Giles, Managing Director of Evolution Partners and author of Onboarded. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.